That's not the only reason.
Well, you tell us.
Distracted by an election.
No.
Well, that's partly it.
Bought and paid for
And
it.
the sense of losing.
Well, both political parties.
Actually, I was going to grab this microphone anyway. I really wanted to respond to the gentleman who asked what kinds of things can we do, and this fits right into it, into the issue. Because the media is bought. Unless you've got alternative media or an alternative route into the media, unless you have a reporter that can really sit in your back pocket, we're not going to get these issues into the media, because the same people who are working the media are working the nuclear power plants and the running the banks and the mortgages into the future. So, number one, we're not going to do that. But there are ways, I think, that we can work around that. I'd like to encourage you to join with Physicians for Global Survival. I'd simply like to, if you've got extra money, join us in supporting people who have the expertise to speak to these issues, like Helen and Ian, who we feel can represent ourselves in public fora. They practically do this out of the goodness of their hearts, so you got extra money, please. Andrea will be more than happy to take it from you. But there are other small ways that we can work at shifting with the media. I have been writing notes and pieces of letters to the Ottawa citizens since I started working here for over a year, and they virtually have not paid much attention to me. They almost did not publish a op-ed that Helen and I wrote, but until we started phoning them. And then Binder wrote a reply, and it took 3 of us writing letters and phoning, and before the person finally published the response to Binder. And Binder did one of those, which totally lies. It was just so one of those full of lies. So I think that we have to be persistent. If you don't think you're very good at writing, but you see something in the newspaper that you support, because these guys still think they want readers. Or if you like something that has been written that you support, send off 2 lines, send off 3 lines. Great article, great op-ed, love that thing. Because that means they're going to look for them more. Like, don't be shy about that. And I think it's going to take persistence. With all of the editors, we might get slammed, we're going to get slammed down again. I got interviewed 5 times in the last week over one news release that we made. And I was amazed at what of the things that Helen said is true. They are ignorant about nuclear, about radionuclides, about radioisotopes, about what radioactivity does, and we need to start thinking really simple ways to talk to them about that. So I think there's a whole number of things in the media area that we can work on. I'm not sure, and it's been how many years before Gordon Edwards has been phoned regularly by CTV in the last week over Fukushima, but he has. He's been on there and he's been called an expert.
Yes.
But he's been working for 25 years.
More.
Or 25 years? 30 years in the trenches talking about radioactivity and nuclear power. So I think that one has to remember we may be in for the long haul. We have to be persistent. Helen has been speaking for 45 years. 40 years. Oops, I don't want to add years to her life. 40 years. And she's still willing. She's a little annoyed about it all. And I think that's quite appropriate to be very annoyed. But she's still annoyed about it all. So I did have a question. And that was about how do we know what kind of radioactivity is reaching North America from Fukushima.
Well, give us the mic.
No, I'm just not hold on to this.
I think these monitors that are very sensitive for testing weapons are picking up cesium and I-131s. That's what they're picking up. But, you know, along with cesium and I-131 go lots of other things. I don't know if plutonium's got out yet. I've been asking nuclear engineers, and they said there has been some criticality, and there have been 13 instances of neutron flux, which means there is criticality. So plutonium might well be escaping too, but that means other actinides. You know what an actinide is? Uranium-238 is very heavy. When it captures a neutron, it turns into plutonium-239, right? But then there are other actinides, only alpha emitters, as dangerous or more so than plutonium, with higher atomic numbers than uranium-238, all of which are formed by capturing neutrons.
The thing about plutonium and uranium is that they're very difficult to detect. You need very sophisticated measuring equipment, and usually a laboratory. And you need to take a sample and wait for 3 or 4 days to count the number of alpha particles and do a calculation. Well, it's difficult. And if you're in the middle of a full-scale nuclear emergency, it's difficult to carry those things out. So what they tend to do is rely on gamma measurements from cesium, or beta measurements from cesium and strontium. Usually it's just cesium, because it gives such a powerful gamma ray that you can always pick it up and you can get fairly good measurements. And that is used as a proxy for all the rest. That's what tends to happen. So it's not, people say, well, what are the different kinds? Now don't worry about that. They're all there. They're all there.
How do you measure tritium, because it's only a beta?
I know. Well, tritium is a little bit like, alpha, with alpha particles. Instead, what you do is you use wipes. You take basically a piece of cloth with a certain diameter, a certain size and weight, and you wipe a surface area, and then you treat that cloth, and you look for scintillations in the scintillation counter, and from that, which has been previously calibrated, and from that you can detect what the concentrations are. Again, it's a laboratory, it's a wet laboratory.
It's like a whole body counter.
Sort of.
Internal minutes.
Sort of.
Scintillation.
Yes, yes. The key thing is you just can't go like that and measure something. You have to take a swab, take it to the lab, do your mechanical alterations, wait for the counts to take up, and then after that do some calculations, and then determine what the concentration is. That takes about 2 days.
And who knows how to do that?
Not many people. Nuclear industry, yeah. It's like they've got the techniques, and they are the people who, which is a real pity. One of the things that I think everybody should have is a pocket dosimeter. Unfortunately, they're very expensive and they're difficult to get a hold of. You can buy them in the States for about $200 or so. Unfortunately, they're mostly just gamma. Some of them have got windows on them, so you can get betas down to about 50 keV, which is quite good. And the thing about it is that you can actually pick up if there's a cloud going over. I've got one with me in my hotel. I didn't think of bringing it tonight because the thing is that you need it to be outside, not inside. Because the first thing you're told, of course, in an emergency is to get indoors and close the windows. And so the fallout shouldn't get too much of it inside the house. So it's not really much use inside a conference hall. But when I'm traveling about, like the first thing I did when I came into Ottawa was I rolled down the window of the taxi, and you'll be pleased to know there's nothing here.
Good. Well. The other thing I want to say is that I keep reading all the time, they've measured radiation, children are getting I131, but it's too low to be worrying. They're lying, they're not talking about internal emitters. No one knows how much is in those children. The only way to find out about internal emitters, as Ian was referring to, is to put the body in a whole body counter, and you get the scintillation from the various isotopes, and you can work out if a patient has been polluted with plutonium or cesium and or, all the rest. That's the only one. It's very expensive, and it's only done occasionally for contaminated nuclear workers.
So what they're doing with the children in Japan, where you see on TV that they're, what is that?
They're only measuring gamma, the stuff that's landed on their hair and stuff. They can't measure it.
They're measuring cesium.
Oh, they're measuring cesium.
They're measuring cesium, but as I said, that's a proxy for everything else. Yeah. If there's cesium there's definitely iodine, and there's definitely sodium, definitely tritium, definitely carbon, definitely krypton, definitely argon, xenon.
Xenon occurs to cesium.
Yes.
Krypton occurs to strontium.
That's right. So there's all these things out there, and also alpha emitters as well. So, but smaller concentrations there are. So just don't be hung up on saying, well, it's just one radionuclide, and I'm worried about the rest. They're all there.
They're all there. Yeah.
Would you?
Sanford, and
I don't think I answered a quick question. Do you recommend as physicians that people begin to, when should we start taking iodine supplements?
I'm going to answer to that, but maybe you have Alan.
You shouldn't take them before, you should take them just before the cloud reaches you. You don't want to start taking them now, but then you don't know when the cloud's going to reach you, and that's why it's just stupid to have iodine tablets near a nuclear reactor, because by the time they let you know there's been an accident, you've already inhaled the iodine.
But some technical points. The big hospitals will all have iodine stock, and
Potassium iodine.
Ki, potassium iodine. So you as physicians are in a good way of saying, you could go to the pharmacy and say, could you show me your Ki stocks, please?
Why do they have them?
For emergencies. For big, well, certainly that's...
For meltdown.
Yes. Put it this way, in England, all throughout Europe, all the big hospitals, the big hospitals, 1,000 bed plus, have got Ki stocks. So just go and ask.
So do the
And
schools
usually-
near Pickering and Darlington, because the parents have to sign a waiver. If there's an accident, their children should be allowed to give them the potassium iodide pills.
Yeah, there's a number of problems here. As Helen said, iodine or iodide is, it has powerful effects. You've got to be careful about it. For a start, the tablets that you have, Ki, shouldn't be bigger than 65 milligram, okay? Half that for kids, say between 5 and 10. But the thing is this, adults really don't need iodine. Kids do. And the younger, the more they need it.
You mean when they're exposed?
Yes. But if you're exposed to iodine, just by radioactive iodine, the lesson that we've learned from Chernobyl is that hardly any adults died at all. They were all children who died from cholera.
Or they died when they became adults
From their exposure as child,
yes.
Yeah.
23,000 have died, and I think 87,000 have had cholera.
Another point is that those people who live near the sea, those populations within, say 75, 80 kilometers of the sea, roughly speaking, 50 miles, don't really have to worry at all, because they naturally get iodine from living near the sea and from ingesting seafoods and crustacea. They get it naturally. It's when you're really inland, and I'm talking about 200 or 300 miles inland, that you start working. One of the reasons why iodine thyroid cancer is so prevalent in Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia is because they are thousands of kilometers from the sea. Their thyroids were starved of iodine. It's true. So whenever huge amounts of radioactive iodine came out, their thyroids took it in. So what does all that mean? Let me give you some other points about iodine just for a second. Oftentimes it's very difficult to get a hold of it. I don't know why. One of the things that you could do is you could go to a Whole Foods store and look for kelp tablets. Kelp, K-E-L-P, or go to a Chinese supermarket and get natural seaweed. Not the artificial seaweed, by the way, real.
Not Japanese seaweed.
I say Chinese supermarket. And in dry packets. But don't feed it, well, you know what to do. You boil, let's say, a 100-gram packet and mix it up with potatoes or rice or any some stodgy material like that and have the whole family eat it. Now, the reason why I'm saying all that is because sometimes you'll have to do something if the emergency arises and you haven't got the KI. So remember, 65 milligram is an adult dose per day. Yeah? No more than that. Keep the doses down, and for kids it's half that. Okay?
Sanford?
What?
Ian, I'd like to thank you for coming. You're speaking on Monday in Oshawa. Are you going to have your dosimeter with you?
Yes.
At question period, I'm going to ask you if you're wearing one. I think we'll give them a damn good scare if you got one with you. And,
You'll be inside.
no, but let's just let them know we got one there. And another thing I want to tell you, the committee that is going to interview you, Mr. Pereira is a retired CNSC official.
I know.
Mr. Graham is a former commissioner, and they're grooming Madame Baudet to be a commissioner. So there's no fairness to this hearing, I'm sorry.
The thing is that the chairman is so incredibly polite and so incredibly thick.
Well, he's a politician from New Brunswick. So I think we should...
well, look, just before you... I don't know whether we should discuss this publicly or not, but the thing about it is that all that a dosimeter does is show you what the ambient gamma ray count is where you happen to be. Other scientists could and would say that that's just a publicity stunt.
But the
So
thing is,
I'm careful about that. The reason why I brought it wasn't to act as a publicity stunt, but to reassure myself that the Fukushima cloud wasn't coming over here. What I was
At
saying.
that moment.
At that moment, yes, exactly. So, if you want to if you wanted to borrow my dosimeter and say I'm measuring if there's any cloud coming over here, you're more than welcome to do so. Just give it back to me when you're finished.
Thank you. And I'd like to also say either next Saturday or the following Saturday, the Toronto Star is doing a big story on Port Hope. We've got a girl that's, I think she's halfway on our side doing the story. And I'm sure Helen's had 8 death threats. I'm going to be up to 7 after this. So, it's going to be a pretty heavy story, and she's quite sour at the industry.
She hasn't interviewed me. Has she interviewed you, Linda? The Toronto Star, she's doing a big feature. She interviewed you, Good. Oh, that's right. You said she was good. Yeah.
She's very good.
She interviewed you, Sandra?
2 hours and a half.
What's her name? I thought she was...
Ravina, and she's East Indian. I can't pronounce her last name, but she's really good.
The Port Hope situation is really a tragedy. I really feel sorry for the community there. Just to explain, it's a uranium refinery. It takes yellowcake and it refines it to make uranium hexafluoride. In other words, almost pure uranium. It doesn't enrich the uranium, that happens in the States. But it's a refinery, and they've been doing this since day dot, in the 1940s. So there's a huge amount of low-grade uranium stores. And you can see them now, still today, covered in tarpaulin, huge big black tarpaulins. That shouldn't be there.
Barrels.
No, not just barrels. They're huge mounds.
The barrels are uranium.
Millions of tons.
Uranium hexafluoride.
Yeah.
That's a
nasty
stuff by itself. But the stuff is this uranium, low-grade uranium, is it's just lying on the ground with chatons over it.
And they're going to transfer it to Welcome, which is in the boundary of Port Hope, just next to the lake.
It's crazy. And the people are in denial. And I feel sorry.
Not us. Not you,
Well,
everybody else.
Pat and Tom
God bless
have
you.
for
Help
50
us.
years.
Doctors need to speak up. Our doctors have been silent for years. Please,
You need to go and see the doctors. You've got to go, make an appointment, and go and see them and educate them, colleague to colleague. You've got to do that. Yeah, that's terribly important. Sanford's had death threats. At the meeting where I spoke, they kicked me out of Port Hobart to speak half an hour away. He brought a gun because he thought he's had such death threats.
That was interesting.
Really?
If that happens, point the dosimeter back at them. Sorry, I shouldn't be so flippant.
This guy's got a question.
I want to thank both of you for coming, and I'm sure everyone here is very appreciative that you have, and it's a big effort to get here. I'm going to ask two short questions, but I hope the answers are very long. I think everyone is still here. And, oh, you want to go home? You can go. I want to thank you, Helen, in particular. Just the profound work you've done over the last 40 years is amazing. You're willing to think about things that most of us aren't, or at least not on any regular basis, but wow, amazing. I want to ask two questions. The first one is, with the difficulties in explaining the health effects, whether it isn't better, I just read a thing by Ralph Nader about just the sheer economics and the insurance and all that. It's absolutely insane. I mean, it makes no financial sense, and I always think of governments and the public responding far more quickly to financial things than these complex health things that they don't understand. So I would hope each of you could talk just briefly about the tension between the focus of how to move things forward to getting nuclear plants not built or closed down. And the other question I wanted to ask Helen in particular was, you must fantasize about how the world would change away from nuclear weapons. And for me, when I read several years ago, one of the things you mentioned was the fact that they get it set up so that in every congressional district, they're making parts of these things, so that every time they vote for more money for the military, it means there's jobs all across the United States. And to me, that is just absolutely insidious for trying to get rid of it. At a time when they're willing to get rid of education and the kinds of things in Wisconsin and Michigan they've already done, how can you even, what is their fantasy of how you even imagine the United States could come to the kind of sense that would be required to get rid of nuclear weapons?
Well, we did it in the 80s. We dropped the bomb on them again and again and again and broke through their psychic numbing. Actually, Americans are very gullible. They'll believe almost anything you tell them. If you're a good speaker, they'll almost follow you off a cliff like lemmings. They're very naive. As one Russian once said during the Cold War, Americans have got a curiosity a mile wide and an inch deep. And I want to say one other thing to my colleagues, that if there was a case of rabies in Ottawa, do you think there wouldn't be headlines in every paper? Well, we've got to make this headlines. This is far worse than rabies, and we've got to talk about how it is to treat a patient with cancer. We've got to talk about the symptoms and the debility and how degrading it is. And
how expensive it's going to be.
well, I don't care about money. I can't talk about money. But also cystic fibrosis, treating a child dying of CF. Talk about it, because we're on the coalface, and that's what we know, and that will get into people's hearts and souls, including the politicians. It will.
Can I make a suggestion to people here in Ottawa? Right in front of the Houses of Parliament, there's the Ottawa River, and it's polluted. It's radioactive.
Really?
Chalk River.
Where?
Chalk River. Sure.
To what extent? I don't know. This is just an idea. It's late at night, my brain is not working all that well. Is to speak to MPs out in the gardens at the back of the House of Commons and just look down at the river and say, realise this is heavily polluted with tritium. And that means that all the flora and fauna around about, they're polluted with tritium as well. And that means, fish there? I don't know. And that means that if there's any wind coming up from the river, that means that the parliamentarians themselves are a little bit contaminated with tritium. I should focus on my meaning a little bit. But it's true, it is. I'm not sure if people know that one of my slides was a value for Ottawa. Well, that's raised. The background level in Lake Superior, where there are no nuclear facilities, is about 2 becquerels per litre. That gives you an idea. You would say, well, where did that come from? Well, it's partly coming from the test bomb in the late 50s, early 60s. And partly because tritium was actually created naturally in the upper atmosphere by cosmic bombardment. So there's always a little bit of tritium around about, as I say, 2 becquerels a litre. Well, the concentrations in the Ottawa River go up to 20-30 becquerels a litre. Not all the time, it fluctuates according to the discharges that Chalk River.
And they discharge deliberately at times, don't they?
And I took the liberty of talking about the fact that plutonium has a predilection for testicles during the hearing, and that every male has a very tiny load in the northern hemisphere of plutonium in his testicle. Well, that actually made the headlines in the Toronto Star financial section. And then on my Facebook, these guys are writing about ooh, and making funny jokes and stuff. But you go to where they're most vulnerable, as doctors we can. And you don't make it up, it's the truth.
The word was they were squirming in their seats.
I was one of them.
I'll go on, Sandra.
Sorry, I have to laugh at that. Sorry, somebody else.
Yes, hi. Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is the second time in a week that I've heard an inspiring feisty Australian give a good talk on stuff that needs to happen in the world. Somebody was asking about a good way of educating people about the subtle and insidious nature of propaganda in our society right now, and the filmmaker John Pilger from Australia does a wonderful job of that. And if you don't know about him, you should go to his website and download some of his documentary films. He has a new one coming out right now. It's called The War You Don't See, and it's about the role of the media in preparing the Western minds for the invasion of Iraq. And he talks about some of the other wars too that we're involved in, but he does a really good job of it. And he recently did a speech at the Sydney Peace Institute in Australia. And his advice then was that we have to go after the media. We have to insist that they start telling the truth. Not ask, not be gimmicky or anything like that, but just insist. And in order to make them do it, we have to organize, and we have to rally the troops.
And I really think, and it just came to me tonight, that we doctors can talk about our patients, not specific patients, but what it's like to treat a patient with cancer, which could be derived from anything, but graphically describe it, because we're the only ones who understand. The nurses can do it too. That's what we've got in our quiver that no one else has got. And we do it in a respectful, credible, professional manner. Freak them out.
I just want to say something. I'm a midwife, I'm a midwife. I just wanted to...
I can't understand. What?
You can understand, I'm a midwife.
I'm midwife.
Remember them. I just wanted to tell you that it's interesting to bring up Chalk River, because actually there was a very good demonstration when the Ardagh Nation was threatened with the uranium mining, when people out in Lanark County, which is not far from Ottawa here, it's about an hour and a bit, about an hour and a half. The the entire native Ardagh Nation decided to stage a demonstration where they actually took canoes and they took their good pristine water, which had not yet been contaminated by the uranium mine going in. They paddled that water in jars up their river and right up to Parliament Hill and presented it to their MPs, their incumbents on the Hill. And there was quite a large demonstration there. Paul Durer was there from Sunnytown. There were a number of people to approach the Conservative incumbent about the concerns they had and how it had only taken them 4 days canoeing, so 6 days canoeing, but it would be 4 days for the river flowing at night and day to get to Parliament Hill and completely contaminate the area here. But they weren't listened to. So, you know, there's some problems going on here. That this has to do with mining rights in Canada and the fact that people do not own the mining rights underneath their own land. So it was a very good coming together of the Aboriginal population and the white settlers in that area. But they went ahead with the mining. So we do have some problems going on here. I mean, it's major. And these things seem to happen and then they die down. We bring them up and they die down. It's really hard to keep this up constantly when there are small groups.
Can I answer that? There's a thing in Canada called the Tritium Awareness Project.
Yes.
Tritium Awareness Project. Google that. It tends to come and go a wee bit depending on the energies of the people involved, because it's, as you say, it's a hard slog keeping going all the time. And there was something else I wanted to mention about Pembroke. Does anybody here come from Pembroke? Somebody asked a question, I think it was this guy here, about SRB technologies. The amounts of tritium that this company was dumping into the local environment were terrible, just shocking. And the doses were so high that there's bound to be leukemias coming up in the future. And nobody does anything about it. And if anybody knows anybody and that can help the people at Pembroke, I'd be really helpful. I really would like that to happen. I feel very sorry for them.
It's like dumping out polio virus. I mean, how dare they? And we cannot remain silent any longer. We cannot. It's an epidemic of cancer increasing now. We can't. Just imagine if I found a lump, you know, I'd freak out. Well, we all would.
Anyway, we finished?
Yeah, I think so.
You're way done.
Done the questions, and I think it's time to call it a night. And I want to thank everybody for coming and for their attention and their concern. And I'm hoping that each of you can take this away and make it move just a little bit further.